No one could believe it in that moment. 73-year-old retired postal worker Dorothy Williams was standing at her own front door, holding in her hand a letter she had tried to forget for 10 years, about to realize that the man facing her was Patrick Swayze. On that cold December evening in 1996, on Dorothy's snow-covered front porch, it was just a letter. But that letter was proof of the biggest mistake in Patrick's life, and none of them knew yet that what would happen in the next 48 hours would remind all of America of the true meaning of Christmas spirit. This isn't just the story of a lost letter. This is the story of the biggest human error in America's postal system, how a celebrity's past haunted him, and how a 73-year-old woman's dignity shamed all of Hollywood. Dorothy Williams had worked as a mail carrier on Chicago's South Side for 42 years. Rain, snow, brutal winters, none of them had stopped her. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night. The postal creed wasn't just words for Dorothy, it was a way of life. In 1986, Dorothy's route included a luxury apartment building. Rich families, celebrities, people who lived in a different world from working-class Dorothy. But she treated every piece of mail like precious cargo, because she understood that sometimes a letter changes everything. On Christmas of 1986, Dorothy had made an unusual delivery. A handwritten letter, expensive stationery, addressed to Mrs. Margaret Swayze, 1247 Oak Street, Houston, Texas. Return address: Patrick Swayze, The Ambassador, Hotel, Chicago. But Dorothy made a terrible mistake that day, rushing through Christmas deliveries, exhausted from double shifts, confused by similar addresses. The letter had been delivered to the wrong house, accidentally placed in Dorothy's own mailbox. When she discovered it, it was too late. The sender was already gone, the addressee's new location unknown. Dorothy tried everything, called hotels, contacted agents, searched records. But in 1986, there was no internet. Tracking systems were basic. Patrick Swayze had suddenly become unreachable after Dirty Dancing's success. The letter had remained in Dorothy's kitchen drawer. For 10 years, guilt had been eating her alive. What if it was important? What if someone needed to read these words? This is exactly where everything changed. In December 1996, Dorothy had retired. Quiet life, small pension, haunted by that undelivered letter. In her mind were 1,000 scenarios. Love confession never received, apology never heard, final goodbye never delivered. Christmas Eve morning, 1996. Dorothy was doing her routine, going out to the front porch to get the newspaper. But a strange car was parked in the driveway. A tall man was getting out, looking confused. "Excuse me, ma'am," the man said. "I'm looking for 1247 Oak Street." Dorothy's heart nearly stopped. The voice was familiar, the face recognizable, but older. "Sir, this is 1247 Oak Street. I'm sorry to bother you," he continued. "I'm Patrick Swayze. I'm looking for about... Well, this sounds crazy, but I wrote a letter here 10 years ago, and I'm trying to find what happened to it." Dorothy couldn't breathe. 10 years of guilt came rushing back. What kind of letter?" Dorothy asked, her voice trembling. "A letter to my mother. The most important letter I ever wrote. Sent it from Chicago during filming, but she never received it. She died thinking..." Patrick's voice broke. "She died thinking I was ashamed of our family." Dorothy's hands were shaking. "Sir, would you like to come in?" But the most shocking thing was this. The letter Dorothy had kept in her kitchen drawer was Patrick's final apology letter to his dying mother. Inside the house, Dorothy sat Patrick down. "Mr. Swayze, I have something terrible to confess." Patrick looked puzzled but patient. "I was your mail carrier 10 years ago, and I made the worst mistake of my career. Dorothy disappeared into the kitchen, returned with an envelope. When Patrick saw his own handwriting, he froze. "My God," Patrick whispered, "the letter to my mother." Dorothy was crying now. "I delivered it to the wrong address, my own address, by accident. When I realized it was too late. I tried finding you, but..." Patrick stared at the envelope. 10 years wondering why his mother never responded to his heartfelt apology. She died thinking I didn't care, Patrick said quietly. At the funeral, people whispered that Hollywood had changed me, that I'd forgotten my roots. Now you haven't seen anything yet. Dorothy opened the letter with shaking hands. Dear Mama, Patrick's handwriting read, I know I haven't been the son you deserve lately. Fame is confusing me, making me act like someone I'm not. But filming this movie reminded me of everything you taught me, about kindness, about staying humble, about remembering where I come from. You're my hero, Mama, always have been. Love, your grateful son, Patrick. Patrick broke down completely. She needed to hear these words. She died thinking I'd abandoned our values. Dorothy was sobbing. It's my fault. 42 years, perfect record. And I failed when it mattered most. But then Patrick did something unexpected. Instead of anger, he felt overwhelming compassion for the elderly woman carrying a decade of guilt. Dorothy, Patrick said gently, may I ask you something? Dorothy nodded through her tears. In 42 years, how many lives do you think you touched? How many important deliveries did you make perfectly? I don't know. Thousands, I suppose. Wedding invitations that started marriages, birthday cards that brightened days, job offers that changed careers, all delivered by you, on time, with care. Dorothy hadn't thought about it that way. Wait a minute. Don't miss this detail. Patrick continued. One mistake doesn't erase 42 years of service. You carried people's most important moments through rain and snow. You're a hero, Dorothy. But your mother might be... You would have understood. She would have forgiven both of us. You won't believe this, but Patrick made a decision in that moment that would change Dorothy's entire remaining years. Dorothy, I want to do something. Will you help me? Anything, Mr. Swayze. I want to establish a scholarship fund in my mother's name. But I need someone to run it. Someone who understands that sometimes the most important messages come from unexpected places. Dorothy looked confused. I don't understand. I want you to be director of the Margaret Swayze Foundation for Letter Carriers, scholarships for postal workers' children. Dorothy couldn't believe what she was hearing. Patrick explained, you carried guilt for 10 years because you cared. That caring is exactly what this foundation needs. Christmas Eve afternoon, Patrick and Dorothy visited his mother's grave together. Patrick read the letter aloud to the headstone. Dorothy placed fresh flowers. Mama, Patrick said, meet Dorothy. She carried your letter with love, even when she thought she'd failed. Just like you taught me. It's not about being perfect, it's about caring. The foundation launched in January 1997. Dorothy Williams, executive director. First year, 50 scholarships to postal workers' children. Patrick visited Dorothy monthly until his death in 2009. He always brought flowers for his mother's grave, always thanked Dorothy for teaching him about forgiveness. At Patrick's funeral, Dorothy spoke. He taught me that mistakes don't define us. How we handle them does. How we forgive ourselves and others. That's what matters. Today, the Margaret Swayze Foundation has provided college education to over 5,000 postal workers' children. Dorothy ran it until age 85, then passed leadership to a scholarship recipient. Chicago Post Office has a plaque. Dorothy Williams, 42 years service, she proved that caring matters more than perfection. Patrick's undelivered letter is now displayed at the Postal Museum in Washington, D.C., a tribute to human connections that mail carries. The story became a postal service training example. Every letter matters because every letter represents a human heart reaching out to another. Dorothy Williams died peacefully in 2018, age 95. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of scholarship recipients. Patrick's letter was found in her kitchen drawer, along with a note. Some deliveries take longer than expected, but love always finds its way. Because Dorothy proved that guilt can become grace when channeled through service, that mistakes can become foundations for helping others, that sometimes the wrong address leads to the right destination. Patrick Swayze learned that a mother's love doesn't depend on perfect words perfectly delivered. Sometimes it's understanding, forgiveness, and faith that matter most. And Margaret Swayze's letter, lost for 10 years, found its way to thousands of families through the scholarship fund that carries her name and spirit. The Christmas letter that never reached its destination became a Christmas gift that keeps giving forever. Because sometimes God uses our mistakes to create miracles. Sometimes lost mail finds its way to exactly where it needs to be. And sometimes an elderly postal worker and a grieving celebrity discover that forgiveness is the most important delivery of all. Dorothy Williams carried mail for 42 years, but her most important delivery was carrying Patrick Swayze's guilt away and replacing it with purpose. Mail gets lost. People make mistakes. But love, forgiveness, and second chances always find their address. The letter reached its destination after all, not to one mother, but to thousands of families who benefited from a foundation born from one postal worker's decade of carrying guilt and one celebrity's willingness to forgive. This incredible story of guilt transformed into grace, of mistakes becoming miracles, reminds us that sometimes our greatest failures become our most meaningful successes. Dorothy Williams thought she had ruined everything, but instead, she had created something beautiful. Patrick Swayze could have been angry, could have blamed Dorothy for his mother never reading his words of love. Instead, he chose compassion, understanding that Dorothy's guilt came from the same place as his own love. A deep caring for human connection. The Margaret Swayze Foundation continues today, not just giving scholarships, but proving that when we choose forgiveness over blame, grace over guilt, we create ripples of goodness that last for generations. Every Christmas, postal workers across America remember Dorothy Williams and Patrick Swayze, the unlikely partnership that turned a lost letter into a legacy of hope. Because sometimes the most important deliveries are the ones that take 10 years to reach their destination, and sometimes the wrong address turns out to be exactly the right place. Love always finds a way home, even when it takes the longest possible route. This story teaches us that in a world where we're often quick to judge, slow to forgive, and reluctant to see the good in others, Patrick Swayze showed us a different way. He saw an elderly woman carrying guilt and chose to lift her burden rather than add to it. Dorothy Williams spent 42 years delivering other people's most important messages. In the end, her most important delivery was the message she gave to all of us, that caring matters more than perfection, that guilt can become grace, and that sometimes our biggest mistakes lead to our greatest triumphs. If this story of forgiveness, second chances, and turning guilt into goodness moved you, remember that we all have the power to choose compassion over condemnation, understanding over anger. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their mistakes don't define them. Their kindness does.